Mayan wishes to behold the ocean. In 2065, following countless years and cultivating diverse organisms, the world is devastated by a nuclear device, a bomb released amidst a global conflict. The small handful of people who survived this terrible event board scout vessels and journey to different regions of the cosmos, searching for a new habitation. Their original home was lost. 7 years later, a team of individuals aboard a scout ship named Pegasus continues their cosmic voyage toward a specific celestial body. If they successfully arrive, they plan to evaluate the planet's environment to determine its suitability for life by analyzing its atmosphere for components similar to Earth's and seeking any type of water, be it liquid or frozen. Should the outcome of this analysis prove favorable, they will notify the remaining ships conducting parallel missions and establish the planet as their new dwelling. Conversely, if the result is negative, their intent is to rejoin their main fleet near Earth. On Pegasus, a young woman named Lila spends time with the ship's mechanic, Pete, and inquires about what Earth was truly like. Pete elaborates on the planet's splendor and describes its various ecosystems before sending her back to her caregiver, Nurse Haley, to complete her daily studies. The ship's captain instructs Pete and the rest of the crew to monitor the ship's oxygen levels and rectify a technical malfunction. Jane and Mike, positioned in the control station, intercept a coded communication from a vessel designated Utah, intended solely for the captain's eyes. Pete performs several calculations and determines that they possess insufficient antimatter to make the journey back to Earth. He verifies his figures and reports them to his captain. The two resolve to keep this sobering truth private, so as not to extinguish the hope of the rest of the crew. Later that day, another crew member named Edwards prepares a meal, and the team assembles to consume it together. During the dinner, they examine the Pegasus's condition and conclude that since the ship is not provisioned for an extended trip, they will need to strive diligently to maintain it. The captain then shares the coded message he had received from the Utah, which stated that the ship had arrived at its target world and found it unsuitable for habitation, so it had begun its voyage back towards Earth. The group is disheartened by this news, as they yearn for one of the vessels to discover a suitable planet quickly so they can cease their search efforts and finally settle down. The subsequent morning, the captain calls for a meeting and informs the crew that they will be reaching the target planet system the next day and to be ready to perform the necessary assessments. That afternoon, Edwards becomes intoxicated, proceeds to the control station, and provokes Mike into a confrontation. As the two men begin to scuffle, Mike notices a code orange alert on the displays, indicating that a ship is in close proximity. Mike panics and alerts the captain, who is astonished by the finding. The captain asks Pegasus to identify the vessel and learns that although the ship lacks an identity beacon, it is of the same make and design as theirs and is of Chinese manufacture. The captain is further perplexed to observe that the ship is entirely stationary. The captain calms down both Mike and Edwards and chooses to continue on their trajectory to get even nearer and learn more concerning the Chinese ship. He then calls for a briefing with all personnel. At the assembly, all the crew members propose different strategies on how to proceed. The captain discloses that the Pegasus is low on antimatter for a return to Earth and decides they should board the Chinese ship to see if they can locate any spare resources. The Pegasus system informs the captain that it could not establish a connection with the new ship's artificial intelligence and suggests it may be inoperative. Pegasus draws alongside the new vessel, and the captain, Pete, Jerry, and Mike board it to investigate the situation. The men enter the new ship and are surprised to find no one, only a few spoiled rations in completely darkened sections. They explore for a while, and Pete instructs Mike to reactivate the Chinese ship's main engine and power on the computer. He then leaves to inspect the rest of the vessel. Mike activates the Chinese ship's primary system, and they upload all the voyage logs and records to Pegasus so that Haley can translate the data. Pegasus reports that it has linked with the Chinese ship's artificial intelligence, named the Dragon, but that most of its operational systems remain offline. While on the Dragon, Pete rushes back to his colleagues, claiming he witnessed something, and asks the men to return with him to examine what it is. The men accompany Pete to investigate. The men retrieve a small Chinese boy and head back to the control station of the ship, playfully mocking Pete's reaction. The men safely make it back to the Pegasus, bringing the little Chinese boy with them. The captain is disappointed to discover that the Dragon does not contain any reserve antimatter and instructs Pete and Mike, who are still on the Dragon, to bring anything else they can find so that they can continue their journey. Mike and Pete comply, and as they prepare to depart, the Dragon, Pete realizes he forgot his oxygen supply unit and goes back to retrieve it, while Mike successfully crosses to the Pegasus. When Pete returns to the hatch, he discovers the airlock is sealed and asks Jane to open it via the communication system. Jane is bewildered by the request, as no one had manipulated the control panel from the Pegasus. The Dragon itself initiates mayhem as everyone attempts to devise a strategy to help Pete get onto the Pegasus before the Dragon's engine becomes unstable in 7 minutes. The captain formulates a strategy and directs Pete to proceed to the escape pod so that they can retrieve him after launching. Then Pegasus reports that the Dragon's antimatter is destabilizing and that they are within the predicted blast radius. Pete follows the captain's order and rushes to the escape pod, only to discover that the Dragon does not possess an escape pod. Accepting his fate, Pete utilizes the Dragon's monitor to communicate with the Pegasus one final time. He reports his findings and begins relaying details of the Pegasus's maintenance procedures so that the crew can assume his duties without difficulty. All the crew members are devastated by the turn of events and express their sorrow to him. Lila enters the room and pleads with Pete to come back. Pete explains the impending situation to Lila, offers her an emotional goodbye, and tells her how deeply he cares for her. Everything's going to be all right. Jerry blames the captain for what transpired and exits abruptly. The captain commands Jane and Mike to steer the Pegasus back toward their intended target planet. Edwards awakens from his concussion while the Chinese boy remains under sedation. Edwards is stunned to learn of Pete's demise and questions what occurred so suddenly. The young Chinese boy wakes up screaming and brandishing a pair of scissors at Haley. Haley calms him down in Chinese. At dinner that evening, the little Chinese boy observes how sad Lila is, approaches her, introduces himself as Jay, and offers her consolation. Later that night, Haley reports to the captain that Jay must have experienced a traumatic event on the ship, and he refuses to answer any of her inquiries about the Dragon or what happened to it. Following this, Pegasus arrives at the destination planet, and the captain authorizes Edwards to launch his probe to conduct the environmental analysis. After several hours, Edwards informs the captain that 2 planets exist side by side, having evaded prior detection, and that Pegasus has discovered a Chinese probe on one of them. The captain is thrilled to hear that they have doubled their probability of finding a habitable world and orders them to wait until Pegasus is close enough to the Chinese probe to read its assessment results. As the crew awaits the results, Edwards offers a drink to Mike, and they spend time together in the control station. Edwards passes out from the alcohol, and when he regains consciousness, he finds Mike has been murdered. Edwards panics and shouts for assistance. The remaining crew members come rushing in and are horrified to witness what has taken place. Everyone immediately wonders about Jay's location and asks Pegasus, who was also in the control room. Pegasus shocks them by stating it cannot answer their question as its system has been compromised. The crew searches for Jay and locates him in the engineering bay. Haley asks him what transpired, but Jay denies killing Mike. Then Lila discloses that she had been engaging in a game with Jay, but that he was absent for a moment. Then the captain discovers the internal sensors of the Pegasus have been ripped out and informs Jane. As Jane fixes the internal sensor, Pegasus reports that all the crew members, including the 2 survivors from the Dragon, are accounted for. Perplexed, Jane goes to check on the captain and finds an unknown man attempting to assault him. She reacts swiftly and eliminates the strange man. The captain has Jay brought in to identify the deceased stranger. Jay reveals that the strange man killed all the personnel on the Dragon. Edwards then receives an inconclusive finding from the Chinese probe and shares it with the group. The crew votes to dispatch a probe to the next planet and await the result before making a decision to land on the planet. But the captain decides to initiate the landing right away, as they are rapidly depleting oxygen on the Pegasus. Despite the Pegasus's caution, the crew attempts to bring the ship down, and after a few turbulent moments, They manage to successfully penetrate the new planet's atmosphere. There, Jane and Edwards leave the Pegasus to check if the planet is suitable for life and are disappointed to find that the atmosphere is still developing and contains too much nitrogen to sustain life. Jane and Edwards return to the Pegasus, and the crew resolves to proceed to the second planet after resting for a couple of hours. When the crew attempts to lift off a few hours later, they encounter a problem with one of Pegasus's engines and several nitrogen leaks. Edwards proceeds to seal the leak and runs into Jerry, who waits until Edwards completes the task and murders him. Jerry then informs Jane and the captain, who are attempting to stabilize the ship, of Edwards' death. He then takes Haley captive and compels the captain to permit using their last remaining antimatter to travel to the second planet, instead of sending a fleet back to Earth. The captain places Jay and Lila in the escape pod and launches it toward the second planet. Jerry runs to the control station and kills Jane as Haley observes. He then reveals to Haley that the captain of the Chinese ship had used the escape pod to inspect their malfunctioning probe on the second planet while his crew waited for his signal and eventually ran out of fuel during their wait. One of the crew members loses his sanity and begins killing everyone except Jay. Elsewhere, Jay and Lila reach the second planet, which is habitable and covered with magnificent plant life. Jay is reunited with his father, who was the captain of the Chinese ship. Back on Pegasus, the captain disables Jerry and learns that the second planet is life-sustaining. He orders Haley to use the remainder of their antimatter to broadcast a signal to all people everywhere so that they can journey to the habitable planet and humanity can endure. The movie concludes as the Pegasus system informs the captain and Haley that they have no chance of survival, but congratulates the captain for successfully completing the mission, and with that, the film ends.